Tonight, we will go deep into the realm of the unknown and question everything as we search for the truth. We will explore the possibility of countless phenomena within the ultra spectrum, and together we will learn that it is all connected. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association, and it is a live stream broadcast. If you have a question, send me a super chat or become a YouTube member. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association. Take a seat, relax, get ready, and welcome to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. Today is Thursday, April 28th, 2022, and I, Ryan Stacey, am your host this evening. It's been 2 weeks. I've been away for a little bit, but I'm back today. I am a licensed private investigator, a citizen journalist, and the director of investigations for the Experiencer Support Association. I am the former national chief investigator for MUFON Canada and the former international field investigator trainer for MUFON in general. Welcome to the channel, and thank you for joining us this evening. Super chat, just click the $ next to your name in the comment box. Tonight's theme is Experiencer Testimony, Hybrid Program, and Ancestry. Our guest for Season 4, Episode 13 is Allison Yellowknee. Allison was born and raised in a small town of Slave Lake, Alberta. It was difficult enough being an Indigenous, and I can't say this word, I never can say this word, Indigenous girl, dealing with cruelty and racism, not without adding paranormal on top of all of that. All of her life, she lived in fear of the dark, as she knew this was when they came to visit. She has experienced wakeful dreams, lost time, and as an experiencer would, she attempted to explain her events as dreams. But too often, she had bruises, markings, and ailments upon waking. Most of her family and friends were unaware of everything she was going through, and the people she confided in didn't believe her. So as many experiencers, she kept silent and led a dual life. As time went on, Allison noticed more symptoms and strange happenings with her body. This brought her to Reiki Healing and soon realized that energy work and helping others was her calling. Reiki has helped her remove the fear that crippled her life, and still having to navigate her mundane life tasks and function in society, she has found solace in her unique perspective to life. Since turning 50 and realizing her children are adults, she wants to share some of her experiences and insights with the hybrid program and how her ancestry has unfolded to tell an interesting story. Allison, put on your tinfoil hat. We are about to go down a rabbit hole. How are you doing this evening?
Hi there, Ryan. I'm doing fine. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Sorry, I'm a little rusty. It's been a while there. I had a little bit of a break, so I'm glad to see you. So we're gonna start the show with an icebreaker as we normally do, and this one is brought to us by CC. So one second. All right. So CC's icebreaker question for today is: which of the following creatures would you choose to live as for one day and why? So your choices are mermaid, vampire, werewolf, or fairy.
Well, I would think a fairy.
Okay.
And the reason is I think I'd like to be flying and exploring all the different things from looking down and also being on the ground. So I think I'd like to have the different perspective of that. I also believe fairies are kind of interdimensional, and I think they travel that way as well. So I think that's what I would like to do.
I don't know. I would either do vampire or werewolf. I don't know why. Probably more of a werewolf because that's closer to like Norse mythology in that kind of bracket there. I'm kind of vibing with the Vikings lately. So I'm gonna go with werewolf. Final answer for $1 million. Good question, CC. Thank you. All right. So normally I ask, why are you the way that you are? How did you get to this place where you are today? But your as I just read for the first time, your experience has been your whole life, and that's what brought you here to share this. Am I understanding that is this the first time you've ever shared an experience in this format?
Actually, no, I've been
Okay.
a guest on a couple different other podcasts.
Good.
And back in the early 2000s, I was heavily involved in the research as well. I was probably one of the first or one of the only Alberta researchers at that time as well. And we met on a platform called Pal Talk. So we did a lot of voice chats there.
Oh, good. How did you find that? How did you find that community and doing things like that?
You know, I found it was very supportive. There was a lot of, at that time as well, that's when, you know, the internet was just coming into fruition, and, you know, we had cell phones, but they're the big bulky ones, right? We didn't have cell phone cameras then. So it was still very new, but a lot of the people that I spoke to were all in the US or all over the world, hardly anything for Canada. So I think at that time, I was one of the very few people in Canada who were researching this topic.
We were talking about that before we got started. There is not very, very little in Canada. It's almost as if Canada doesn't exist. And why do you think? Why do you think that is? How come we're not so popular, us Canadians?
You know, when you look at everything else, we're never really in the mainstream of everything. Anything from music to movies. There's a lot that they don't realize we're still a big country here. There's a lot going on up here. So I don't know when we'll be in that mainstream of anything. So hopefully, you know, as the years go on, that we'll start seeing a lot more Canadian content.
Maybe we don't need to be in mainstream. Maybe that thought process that it's something we need to have. There is a lot of Canadian networks that I work with, and I'm sure as you've networked too, that it's not part of the personality. It's not their goal. So you think it has something to do with that? Maybe we're just not striving to be mainstream or famous in that sense, but we're more so focusing on the research, focusing on the people, and trying to find the answers and doing the work, if you will, less than, you know, promoting it.
You know, I don't really know how to open those doors up. Like there's another, and I don't want to, you know, bring up other podcasts, but I know there a lot of content is the US as well. There's a lot of US contact, but the host is from Canada. So it's like, you know, they're having events, but in the US, like, hello, why not in Canada? So I don't know what it is.
We're working on holding an event in September. So we're trying to get that started. I'm with you on that. We've done a few, and yeah, I feel you on that. We need to put Canada on the map, and we're working on that. So hopefully, you know, we'll meet one day. For sure. For that too. So okay, so let's. So it sounds like your paranormal experiences are like there's a variety and they're very complex. So if you were to group them all up and you take your whole life's experience, what percentage would you put on them being negative and negative or positive experiences? Are they all positive? Are they all negative? A bit of both?
So it's a bit of both, but throughout my childhood and up to my young adulthood, I would have said they're all negative. And mostly because of the intense fear that I had. It was a lot of trauma and fear. And in the experiences that I had, I don't feel like they were positive experiences, especially with the experiments and things that were done to my body. So it wasn't until my early 20s that I actually had different experiences that were more of, I don't even know. There was really not much communication because I was still afraid. But not all of them were negative. Also, with that, I've had a lot of spiritual experiences as well. So, you know, I think that I always believe that once we're kind of open to having these experiences, we're kind of open to the universe. So I was having a lot of different experiences.
Okay. Do you want to share? Are there any experience that you are comfortable sharing? Like, I like to walk through the life, if we could, like to your earliest experience that you remember, and then maybe share that, and then we can kind of I can learn that and
sure
understand.
So in 1979 is when things started to happen for me. So Slave Lake is 2.5 hours north of Edmonton. And Wabasca, Alberta is another hour beyond that. So my family is from Wabasca, and that's where a lot of these experiences started. And so the first experience is we had lived in Wabasca with my grandmother's property, and I was 7 years old. One night she called me outside, and I thought that was different. She never really comes outside to come and get me, but it was dark out that night, and she grabbed my hand. She said, "Don't be afraid, but I want to show you something." And so she pointed up to the sky, and there was like zigzag of lights going across the sky, and they were going from. There's no way that it was a plane or a helicopter. The way it moved across the sky, streaks going across. There's no way a human was in that, because there's nothing can go that fast. Mm-hmm. There's two of them in there, and they were like dancing in the sky, basically. And I didn't understand what it was at that time. I didn't know what she was showing me. I didn't know what it was at all. So around the same time frame, it was the summer. I was sitting next to a chicken coop, and my grandmother was in there getting eggs. My uncle, who was probably about 16 at the time, walked by, and he went through the sneezing attack, and then all of a sudden he was like holding onto his nose like this, and he was bleeding profusely out of his nose, and he was screaming because of the pain that he was experiencing. And I just watched him as he was digging in his nostril, and he pulled out something out of his nostril. And I ran up to go look at it, and it was a little ball that kind of had little lines, squiggly lines all through it was hollow inside that little ball, but there was a hook, and there's a little hook at the end of it. And so that was probably what was lodged up in his cavity. So when he sneezed, he must have loosened it, and then he pulled out of there, and he was still bleeding. And he went up to my grandmother and showed her what it was. And she just said to him, like, "What did you put that up there for?" Like, she didn't know that. So those are all like memories. Like, I remembered those, but I didn't really put them two together until 1999, when I actually was going into facing my life and facing these, what I used to call wake dreams. Because with those ones were like conscious awake things that happened. So fast forward to the fall, we had a UFO encounter with my family, and there was hundreds of witnesses to this in the small community of Wabasca. So my grandmother has property. It's across the lake. So it's lakefront property, and it's about, I don't even know if it's 10 acres. I'm not too sure exactly what it is. So we had a small mobile home next to her house. And that evening, there was 4 of us in the trailer. I was 7 years old. My brother Darren was 5, and my brother Stephen was 7 months old. And he was like hanging out in the little walker that we had walkers back then. And my cousin, who was 13, she was babysitting us. My back was against the wall on the sofa, but what was behind me was the lake. And in this small community, there was no street lights. It was all dirt road. Like, it was very, very rural. There was and there was also one way in, one way out. It was a very small community. And suddenly there was lights hitting the trailer wall above me. So I looked outside, like the lights were hitting the wall across from me. So I was like, that meant the light was coming from behind me. So right. I looked outside, and I couldn't even see anything except the underside of the UFO that was coming down, actually. So it was coming down, and as it was coming down, the loud humming noise was starting to hurt my ears, and all of us were holding onto our ears because it was so loud. And within seconds.
Could you hear it, or could you feel it?
It was both.
Okay. Interesting.
So the feeling of it and the noise of it was so loud. We all were covering our ears. And then as it came down closer, the house started to shake violently. It was like an earthquake. We had pictures on the walls and things on the counters, and everything was falling off those counters on the walls. And we're all screaming and crying. I remember just that fear. We were just, afraid of what was happening around us. And then my brother and I ran under the table. We were hiding under the table, trying to get safety from everything falling. And my little brother was in his walker, and he was like trying to reach up for us to hold him. And then from here, we had like what I call chopped memory. So I had the next thing I remember is like my cousins running back and forth. And then the next moment, my brother isn't next to us anymore. I'm like yelling for him. We're trying to look for him. My cousin's running back and forth looking for him as well, and we couldn't find him. And then the next minute I look out again, and we're all sitting on the couches again, and we're all like calming down from heavy crying. So we're all kind of coming down from that. And then I looked out the window again to see if it was still there, and it wasn't above us anymore, but now it was across the lake, or at the lake, not too far from where we were, because we're on the lakefront. But the UFO was hovering above the lake, and it was saucer shaped, and it had a belt. I always describe it as a belt of color that kind of circled around the UFO, and it was shining outward. The colors were shining outward. But the one thing that I recall too was there was a beam of white light that came in the middle of the UFO, and it was right going into the water, and it looked like stream of water going up through. So I don't know if it was sucking up water, but it was a stream of water going into it, and then within seconds it was gone. And then from there, my mother walked in. She was supposed to go to the town of Slave Lake, as I mentioned. It was like an event happening that evening, and they were supposed to be gone for the evening. I thought she had just left, and she saw the UFO and came back. So I thought this all just happened in seconds or minutes, but it was actually hours later. And she walked in, and I said, Mommy, did you see the UFO? Is that why you came back? And she said, what are you talking about? We just got back from Slave Lake. And then she looked around and saw the big mess and was wondering what was going on. And my brother and I are like, Mommy, we're trying to, tell her what was going on. And she was just focused on looking at the big mess around her. And my little brother was in the walker, and he was like slumped over the walker, and he was struggling to breathe. And she picked him up and said, what's going on with him? He was pale. He was struggling to breathe. And so she's like patting him on the back. What's wrong with Stevie? What's wrong with him? And within a few seconds, now, while she was doing this, me and my brother were sitting behind, and we could see my brother's face. And his eyes had rolled up. His mouth was wide open. And then he stopped. He started to have a convulsion. He stopped breathing. And while he was having this convulsion, his arms were straight out, his legs were stiff, and there's a stiff baby with eyes rolled up in, and then he froze that way. And
wow.
So we all started screaming again. We're all terrified. My cousin, though, at the time, she was like in the corner of the living room. She was sitting in the fetal position the entire time, and my mom was like, Glenda, like, what's going on here? And Glenda didn't even snap out of it until we all were screaming again. When Glenda did finally snap out of that trance that she was in, she said, go get Clara, which is my grandmother. But as Glenda was leaving, Clara was coming in to the trailer and was checking on us, because her and my cousins had seen the UFO as well. And so my mom handed the baby to her, and she didn't know what to do because she's got this stiff baby in her arms, and she didn't know. And so they ran to the house, and my mother literally was dragging me and my other brother. We did not want to go outside. I remember that fear of not wanting to be outside. We were just so afraid of everything out there. And so she literally dragged us to the next house. My grandmother laid my brother on the kitchen table, and then told us to go to the living room with the other kids. And so we're all huddled in there, and I can hear my auntie, who was reviving him. She said, he's not getting oxygen. She was doing mouth to mouth and trying to bring him back. And she said, he's not getting any oxygen. There's something lodged in his throat. So she was scooping something out of his throat. I did an interview with her later. She explained to me that it was like a thick white foam, and it was at the back of his throat, like his whole mouth was foaming. And it's not the usual saliva type foam. It was something with substance. So when she finally got that out of his throat, she was then able to get a passageway through to do the mouth to mouth, and then she brought him back. So it was approximately 5 to 7 minutes that he was not breathing. So then from there, they got him into the vehicle, and they went back to Slave Lake to the hospital, because there was no hospital in Wabasca at the time. So they had to get back on the highway, 135 kilometers of dirt road to get to Slave Lake. And then he was admitted to the hospital on October 7th, 1979.
Okay, so that's like, I don't even know how to describe that. I mean, it's not, that is a lot. So all that as a result from the presence of this what we're calling a UFO. Mm-hmm. That happened, and then it affected so many people. So many people witnessed it. And then that is what appears to be some sort of EMP, or maybe some sort of biological effect. So did it affect anyone else that way, or just was it your brother? Just
the baby, yeah.
And the baby. Okay.
So apparently, so after doing some research on this, because at the time I didn't realize, like, there's other people that witnessed this. It wasn't until 2001 that I was doing interviews about this, and I probably interviewed 12 different people who lived in Wabasca at the time, and they remember that night. And it was put in the local paper as well in Slave Lake. RCMP were called, and apparently as the RCMP came into the community, people were following the RCMP because they were going to the house, my grandmother's house. And so apparently a train of vehicles were following the RCMP to my grandmother's house. Certain things that I don't know yet were, did the RCMP go in and talk to my grandmother? Did they go in and I don't know any of those things. I was only 7, right? So, and it wasn't something that my grandmother recalled either, because towards the end of her life, she had dementia, and there was a lot that we didn't get cleared up before.
What year was that? That was 1999 or 79? Mm-hmm. Okay, I've been also trying to find, to see if there's anything readily available to bring up for that.
So I did try to investigate it myself. I went to the Slave Lake. There was a man there he had 2 newspapers, and I went to him because he has an office here in Edmonton. And there was a Slave Lake fire that happened in 2000, I think 10 it was, I'm not sure. And unfortunately, his place of business also went up in flames, and a lot of his archives went up in flames. Some of them were there, and he actually let me go there and go through everything that he did have left. And the months of this happening in that year were the ones that were missing. He had he had like September's articles, he had December's articles, but he didn't have November, December's articles.
So have you ever done a Freedom of Information request on so that's something I could help you with. If we could narrow down the date and time and do a range, so I can send those to the RCMP, because if RCMP was present, then perhaps they might have a copy of those records and release those. That's definitely something I could help obtain. How far away is it Duhamel? Have you heard of Duhamel in Alberta? I just recall that back in the 70s, I believe there was a UFO sighting there in Alberta. So Canada lists a bunch of historical or notable UFO events. And we got Shag Harbor, Falcon Lake, and there's Clan Lake, and there's so Duhamel is one in Alberta. So just curious as to, with so many witnesses and with the involvement, as to why this wouldn't be added to that roster. And I haven't even heard of it. I'm learning about this for the first time too. So I find that interesting, because that is, you have everything there, and are there military bases nearby by chance?
No, not at the time. So in Wabasca, it was just a native community, but Slave Lake has had a lot of experiences. And there's actually another report from a guy out of a community close to Slave Lake who had he had experiences all his life as well. And his story was in the Edmonton Journal, which of course is a bigger platform of media than the small town little, newspaper. But I did report it to the Alberta UFO group. It was back in 1999. I reported it there, and it was like a long story, and somebody paraphrased everything into 2 paragraphs, and that's what's out there in the media. Or when you search Wabasca UFO, it'll come up with this little blurb. So Yeah.
Did you find that helpful, reporting it to a UFO group?
Unfortunately, I found out the person who was running the group, he didn't want to take into any stories that were negative, because he believes, he wrote a book as well, but his are all about light beings and that they're all helpful and they're all here to help humanity. And so he didn't like my story, or he didn't believe my story. I don't know.
Well, that's not good at all. We have, like, you got to take with the good with the bad, and because there's information that needs to that can be extracted from that, right? So opinion on it is, that's opinion, right? So you're the experiencer, by, if he was good enough. I've heard of AUG, so like, yeah, sorry about that. Did you report to MUFON or anywhere else? Anything else after that? Nothing? Or yeah?
So in 2001, I was working on a film project, and it was going to go to Space Channel and APTN, as well as at the time ITV News. So I was working on this documentary. This is why I was doing the interviews with people. The last step of everything and getting this produced was getting the budget together. I worked with a lot of actors and directors at that time. So I had everybody at my fingertips to get this job done. At that time, I did reach out to MUFON in Vancouver. We had MSN Messenger back then. I don't know if you remember back then.
I remember MSN, yeah.
Okay, so I did speak to somebody. I don't remember his name, but he was based out of Vancouver, and he was sending me a file transfer through MSN Messenger, and it was a list of skeptics, because apparently I needed to have a skeptic on my show for them to approve it. So
who makes those rules?
This was something Space Channel wanted. They wanted to have someone to debunk my story as I'm telling my story. I don't know. So in that file transfer, though, my computer got hacked, and that's a whole story in itself. But I haven't reached out to MUFON since.
Well, I don't blame you. I mean, I've been part of that rodeo for a while too. But I mean, the problem with UFO groups is I guess all those things that you've explained, because they're looking for, even with the Sci-Fi Channel, they're looking to address all the audiences and all the check all these boxes, so as many people watch it, and because they're pushing for ratings, and they're pushing for cultures and diversity and things like that, trying to make sure they can make the money through ad revenue. That's what's in focus. And unfortunately, the experiencer, is not really taken at face value, and that happens quite a lot. So you tried, it didn't meet your expectations, you didn't give up, so you're still trying. So that's in 2001. So, and you haven't reported MUFON since. What have you been doing with it? Have you buried it? Have you been trying to still solving it? Do you have new leads today?
Well, there was threats to my family.
Oh, wow.
So it was, like I said, it's a story in itself why I pulled away. And during that time, my children were still very young. They were, I just had a newborn as well. So I was not prepared to put my family at risk. And I thought, okay, I'll wait until my children are adults. And I want them to know exactly what may happen, or, because during these experiences and me trying to tell my story back in 2001, we had other experiences where one of my sons was having shared experiences with me. And it was pretty much, he said to me, "Mommy, they said they're going to take me if you don't stop doing what you're doing." He was 3 years old. He didn't know what I was doing. But this is what he told me. And then we had a second shared experience, and it was the same thing. He said, "Mommy, you're not stopping." And so I stopped.
Interesting. So, but did you start up again, or you just stopped then?
I'm just getting back into it again. The last couple of years, as I mentioned, I was on a podcast a few years ago. That was me coming back into it. And then since then, I've, been involved in a few different groups and talking to a few different people and just trying to get back into it again, because a lot's changed in the research from then and now.
So, that's true. And research is still changing and developing. And a lot of people that are, are debunking each other and fighting with each other right now, like it's chaos, which is kind of good because more people are asking questions, new faces are coming in and challenging the evidence and trying to get answers, because we need to know what's going on. So with combined with the research that you've done, forget the experiences that you've had in trying to get the message out. That's unfortunate and we run into those problems too, which is why we've created our own media company, so we can just ignore all those things and do it the way it should be, focusing on the experiencers. What do you believe is happening? What is the result? What actually is going on with you?
Well, if you were to ask me why they're here, so I'll share another quick story. Okay. When I was in grade 3, so I think I was about 8 years old. It was about a year after this event, our UFO event. We had to write a story in English in our school about what was our most memorable experience that we've had in our life. People are writing about the trip to Disneyland or the pony they got for their birthday, and I wrote about my UFO experience. And so I was excited to see what I was going to get for a mark, and how the teacher gave us our assignments back was she pinned them to a big bulletin board at the back, and we all had to go run and go get our stories. And we had a big F on it, the circle around it. And she saw me crying and just come and talk to me. So I did, and she said, "You're supposed to write something that was real." And I said, I did. That was real. That happened to us. My brother almost died after the UFO. And she said, "Really?" And she said, "So why do you think they're here?" And I, with a hesitation, said, "They're here for our natural resources." We had no oil exploration at all. It was just a native community. And then about 1990 to 92, oil exploration happened in Wabasca, because yes, it is abundant with natural resources. So I knew that even before, even knowing what the word natural resources meant. But then, of course, as I became a preteen and beyond, that's when I learned more about the hybrid program. And at the time, I didn't even know what was happening to me. It wasn't until 1994 that I learned about that more.
So you want to talk about that? What is this hibernation program, or hybrid? So I think I would talk about first how I was the symptoms that I was having and how I was feeling. So from the age of like 8 o'clock, I was taken, and experiments were done to me. I woke up on a table, and I didn't feel like I was in a UFO, though. I felt like I was underground. I felt it was cold. It was very dark in there. There was only 2 light sources in the room. One was above my head and one was above another girl's head. And there was like transparent curtains that were dividing us. And she was crying. So I woke up to, like, I couldn't move. I was laying there, and I heard her crying. And I said to her, "Where are we?" And she said, "They're coming." And I saw 2 beings walk by, 2 figures walk by the curtain going towards her, and she was screaming. Moments later, there was no noise coming from her. And as they approached me, they came to me, and this huge syringe needle was coming at me, and that was injected into my heart. I recall feeling the puncture of that needle going into my heart, and then I felt the cool liquid fill my chest, and then I couldn't breathe at all. I remember that was like I was at the end of a breath, and that was it. I thought I was dying. And so I had those kind of experiences where, like I said, I've woken up and I was not in my bed. I did feel like I was in a cave, because I remember like trying to run away. I somehow I don't know if it was like my spirit running away or my body, but I felt I was going in this cave, like a tunnel, and it was all like chiseled out tunnel. And I remember trying to run through this tunnel. And then
like they do a lot of mind trickery as well. So the next thing I remember, like even though I'm trying to run down this cave, the next thing I'm seeing is it's like I'm floating back down to my house, and I can see my house. I can see the wall at the end of my house, but there's no wall. I don't see the wall. But the next thing I know, I'm running through the house, and it was like a slingshot. I was like a hard time to get through the wall, and then I'm through the wall, running down the hallway of my house where my parents were. And I was screaming, and I was like, telling them, Mommy, I said, the aliens took me and they put a needle in my heart. And my parents just said, go back to bed. You had a bad dream, go back to bed. And yeah, so I came out that wall, ran down the hallway, and yeah, so that was.
Okay, so I have questions. Hold on. So there's this astral travel kind of element to the out of body experience kind of element that's kind of attached to this. So if you at the end of it you're at home in bed and parents telling you go back to bed, it's just a dream. So do you remember going to sleep before this event has happened? No.
That's why I called them wake dreams. A lot of times I was already awake and then I'm waking up again.
Is it possible for you to leave the house without your parents knowing, like physically?
No.
So it could have been some sort of like, that's what we're trying to understand how they do it, right? It could be some consciousness or mental hijacking, and whether or not you physically go somewhere or mentally go somewhere. But when it's so vivid and so real, you still feel it. So the other question I have is with that syringe or needle, pardon me. Was there any residual evidence, any markings left behind?
So, I don't remember looking down at myself. Like I said, I was only about 8 years old. But I did have a lot of symptoms after that. I had a hard time taking a deep breath. I had shallow breaths. I was very weak and listless. And for an 8-year-old, that's not very common. I also was having like this extreme headache, and I couldn't even talk. And it was like talking at the end of my breath. And I was like, Mom, I can't get up. I can't move. And she's like, get up, you got to go to school. Like, she thought I was faking it. But after 2 days of having these symptoms, like I remember I could barely walk. I was like, my heart hurt. Like I could not take a deep breath. So I was having these symptoms of like this heart pain, the headache. Of course, the insomnia kicked in at that point. Now I was afraid to sleep because so many things were happening to me when I'd go to bed. And then so I remember her taking me to a doctor about on the third day. And that doctor said to me, so Allison, when did these symptoms start with you? And then I said to him, after the aliens put a needle in my heart. Mm-hmm. That was my response. And then my mom and the doctor looked at each other and they nodded their heads, and it was just dismissed.
See, that's the hard thing, right? So like something happened. Like it's so vivid in your mind. I mean, you're not, I don't see any signs of deception, like watching this and learning this for the first time too. And the thing is that the doctors, how do you prove that? They can only work with what they can prove and what they know. And they do play on the fact that children's imaginations and things like that. And it's at a time where we're still learning it. Cold War had ended and all these other things where, it's been covered up. So if this had happened in today's age and you were to go to the doctor, do you think the doctors would say the same story just now, today? What do you think?
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think a lot of them are still closed-minded. If somebody goes in there and they're having, they're dealing with trauma and they talk about something like this, they might institutionalize me and think I'm schizophrenic or something, right?
That's a whole other rabbit hole there. They like to do that for no reason, let alone giving them one like that.
So I'm thinking with what's out there now as proof, and there's so much out there now. I would be hopeful that doctors are more open-minded to listening especially when children speak. I think when children speak, it's truth, right?
They say that because the children don't know any better. right? They haven't been conditioned fully. They haven't been taught all these things and aren't real. They're saying what they see. And so you calling it an alien, how did you learn that word at 8 years old? If that's not what was going on, the word alien, where did that come from?
That's a good question, because I was wondering that even when we had the UFO experience itself. I remember my neighbor coming over, and they had seen the UFOs too. So we all of us, there was like 8 of us kids, we're all like walking through the woods and we're looking for alien tracks. And I think at the time, anything alien would have been like the Great Gazoo. Was that Flintstones? So it would have been TV shows like that.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess the conditioning kind of started because Roswell had happened, I guess, prior to that. So, I mean, we all grew up, even being Canadian, we still hadn't watched American stuff, right? So we all learned all that. So
we only had one channel.
Did you? Oh, wow. Okay, so you said you saw these beings. Let's go back to that. What did these beings look like?
Oh, so the thing is, I couldn't see their face. They were tall. Okay. And that I used to say they were cloaked. And what I meant by that was that they had robes that were covering. And so I don't know if that was part of their facade or how they didn't put fear into us.
I'm finding robes to be a very common trend or characteristic amongst experiencers. And they all look different, but these robes are a thing. Strange.
Yeah. So there was 2 of them. I was already held down. I don't know if the sheet that was covering me was what held me down, but my body I could only move my eyes. I could not move anything else until after that, the needle injection. Then I was trying to run, and it was that, feeling like my feet had cement blocks. I was trying to run and I couldn't do it. And that's why I wasn't sure if it was like my spirit jumping out of my body. You talked about astral traveling, because I started to do that a lot as a kid. I did a lot of astral traveling. And so I don't know if that's where I learned it from, but it was something I did a lot, and I thought everybody did it. So
yeah, it seemed natural to you, seemed normal to you, and you were trying to explain it, and then people didn't necessarily believe it. So I can understand the doctor's standpoint, but what about your parents? Like, how come? Would they have believed you? Do they believe you now? The way they were raised, is it like, were they taught not to believe in those kind of things? Or
so my mother dismissed a lot of my experiences. My father traveled a lot with business, so he wasn't really around very much, and so he wasn't one I would really talk to about it, except that day when my brother had when our UFO experience. My father and uncle were actually across the lake. They were on a hunting trip, and so from where they were the night of the UFO experience I'm talking about, I thought they would have seen the UFO, but it was not till the next day that my father and uncle were coming back, and I stood at the cliff of the lake, and I was waiting for them to arrive to let my dad know, Daddy, there was a UFO last night. Did you see the UFO? Stevie almost died. And then as soon as I said that, he dropped everything and ran to the house to go find out what was I talking about. Because I said Stevie's at the hospital, and I'm chasing my dad, but Daddy, the UFO. One thing I can say is that my father has never really talked to me about it. They're both still alive. And why it alarms me that my father wasn't one to be very open was because his mother and numerous siblings were having experiences. So my grandmother's had lifelong experiences, and then some of my aunts and uncles, and then some of my cousins. So it seemed to be selective within the family bloodline who was going to be next on the list and what generation. It seems like it is a generational thing. Other people in my research of this, especially the ones that I've talked to here personally, they've all had lifelong experiences, and it does follow their bloodline. So.
So you're Indigenous, and your family is of that background. So do you, culturally and I guess spiritually or religiously, like, is there any room or explanation for the possibility of extraterrestrials or aliens, or like, forget the label, but the beings from outer space or another place? Is that in your culture?
Well, apparently it was to some point, and I don't know where the disconnect happened. I believe that the disconnect happened when the residential school era happened, because it seems like if you hear stories of some of the old people will talk about star beings, and I've heard of other people within the same Slave Lake area who have sat with elders, who elders have sat with alien in a sweat lodge, for example. And so I've been waiting to connect with that elder to see, talk to them more about what do you know, because I do believe that there might have been a connection, but somewhere along the lines that disconnect happened where we don't know what's going on.
Interesting. Yeah. Seems to be, we need more info. We need them to come back. We need them to fill the blanks. There's a lot of us. It's like they came, they did something, and then they left. And here we are trying to figure it all out.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely would help if we had some answers. So you mentioned your brother and the baby. So the baby back then, like the baby and brother are still alive, or have they survived? Like how are they today? How are they coping with this today?
Well, the one who was 5, he and I didn't even really talk about it until maybe about 20 years ago. When he said, "Do you remember that night when there was a UFO and everything was shaking and Stevie almost died?" I said, "Absolutely, I remember it," because I didn't think he would. He was 5, but he does have a lot of chopped memory as me as well. My brother Stephen, who's now I think 43, he doesn't have any memory of it because he was only 7 months old at that time. Neither of them recall any like ongoing experiences like I did. And a lot of people, like my cousin Glenda, who was babysitting us that night, she was 13, but she has no memory of the UFO event. But she remembers what happened afterwards when my brother was having that convulsion. So she has no memory of what happened the night of the UFO, but she remembers like seeing that. And she was going to be a part of my story as well. I wanted to, talk to her about like, we need to explore this a little bit more. Like, what do you remember? And she remembers nothing. So
have you guys done regression or thought about regression hypnotherapy?
I've thought about it. I've been wanting to do that, which is why my story hasn't really come out yet. Because it's like I've got this big puzzle, and I have so many missing pieces, and you can't tell the whole story with all the missing pieces.
And I agree, and that's why I'm building a database to connect these pieces, like to connect you and other experiencers together to kind of like network and share in the same way, because like that's so relatable within your family. So you guys have this bonding experience, traumatic, if you will, but like it's still bonding in a sense. But it is familiar to other testimonies and experiences that I've investigated and that I've heard for too. So it's common, and it'd be interesting to have like not just outside of family, to share. I'm not going to mention any names, but there were some people commenting earlier that have similar experiences to what you've described. And it'd be interesting to share notes, because maybe it's the same people, maybe it's the same place, and maybe they remember details that you don't remember, and that will help you remember these things as well.
Right.
Have you made a report to Tessa yet at all?
I believe I did. I don't recall. I've tried a few different places to report things, but.
So if you have, then I do apologize, because I'm working on putting on getting the database all sorted out so I can properly do the investigations the way that I want to do them, which is better than the way I've done them in the past. If you haven't, then please do, and then I can definitely guide you in a way to get these freedom of information requests too, perhaps of some government documents that could exist if it was documented. Because if RCMP was called and they showed up, there should be some sort of documentation that exists, and I can help you get that.
Well, that'd be great, because I did try. I reached out to the RCMP. There was 2 numbers emails that I sent out, and they said, "Oh, you're at the wrong department. You got to email this."
Yeah, you got to be very specific with these requests, and got to connect the dots, and then you try it. If it fails, it doesn't mean you fail. It just might have meant you asked the wrong question. So if you're like, if the date's wrong, they'll search the date, but they won't tell you that they have the file the following day unless you ask for it. So it's we got to work on get the data going and be specific when you ask. Wow, that's I want to say fascinating, but I don't mean that in a positive way, like in a movie style way. I mean, like it's not amazing. What's the word I'm looking for? It's not terrifying. This is just awful. Like not awful, but like it's wild. Let's just say that. How about that? Well, let's agree on that one. That one's wild. And I mean, okay. So any other markings on your body at all?
Right. So
the incision. I think that's kind of where we were getting to, and then we got sidetracked there.
Yeah, sorry, I tend to get sidetracked.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. I'm making notes as we're going too. I'm scribbling as well. Just make sure I'm paying attention here.
So after I was 8 years old and I was having a lot more frequent visits, I would wake up with markings on my body, and I used to think they were. I didn't know what they were. It was on my arms, mostly my arms, my inner thighs, and my torso, the sides of my body, like my sides. And they looked like fingertip marks, and they were circular, and they almost looked like little burns. I did go to the doctor several times for these, and the doctor would misdiagnose me as having a ringworm because it looked like ringworm. But they were significant because they'd be like fingerprint marks of the way they would be like 3 or 4 or 5 in a row on each side. And then I would visualize that they were holding me down, and then especially with the, I was having a lot of belly button issues, a lot of pain. I would find a lot of stuff in my belly button. I never put anything in my belly button, but I would be pulling out like black, gummy, slimy stuff sometimes.
They can. I know there's procedures where they can go through there and get in on the insides and stuff. So that's odd.
Right, and so that started about 8 years old, and throughout my whole teenage life, I had a lot of those belly button gunk stuff going on. The pain in my stomach, those marks all the time. I do have a scar on my scalp. It's kind of shaped like a T, and I got that sometime about 8 or 9 years old. And whenever I knew they were coming, I could feel it. Like I would feel like my ears would be ringing, like a really high pitched ring, or I'd get this like feeling at the back of my neck, like someone's watching me. I always would know when they were coming, and I'd just feel a lot of anxiety, and just tried to fight the sleep all the time, because I knew that when I closed my eyes, they're going to come for me. But then I learned that they were still taking me even while I was still awake, and I'd be waking up again. And I'd be waking up with I had this, like, I remember wearing this button-up pajamas. Back then we had pajamas that had buttons all the way down, like halfway down the chest and to the neck. And I remember, like, sometimes my pajamas would be on backwards, like they'd be around the other way, or they'd be unbuttoned.
That's interesting. I've heard that too many times.
And also, sometimes I felt like I was just dropped, like on the floor, like next to the bed, not on the bed, but next to the bed. And, if you roll over, and I've fallen off the bed a couple times, and there's a way that happens. You kind of feel, but this was like, and I just dropped right there. So there was a lot of times I woke up on the floor. I felt like I just dropped there and woke up that way.
Interesting. I mean, like I've always tried to imagine the amount of work it would take for like a human being to enter a bedroom and kidnap someone and take them without anyone noticing, do all these things, bring them back, put them back to bed, let alone an alien. Like, I mean, it's difficult for a human being to even do that. So the technology that would have to exist to also pacify everyone else that's in the house, to distract them from noises and sounds. If you have any animals in the house, to stop them from alerting everyone, to induce you to be, or experiencers to be so out of it, to not be able to realize this is happening. It's very difficult. So I always tend to lean towards the possibility of it being psychogenic or some sort of mental attack versus physical attack. And I'm learning through studies that you can experience pain through dreams. You can experience a lot of things and while you're sleeping, and we don't even know where we go when we dream, whether that's the real world or and this is the dream world. We don't really know all those things are happening. So besides coming to a conclusion, which we have no way of knowing until we have answers. Have you ever spent some time thinking about why you and not and your family, as opposed to someone else? Like why what makes you so interesting to them to be visiting you all the time?
Well, that's my purpose of doing this, is I'm trying to find out why, to know, like, what is it? So I've, throughout my life, I'll share this. I've had messengers come to me, and I call them messengers because they've come with some validation of these experiences through my life. I've never paid for a psychic to ask them questions about this. I'll give you an example. I was walking down, I was working for the government at the time, and I'm walking downtown Jasper Ave here, and I come up to the stop light, and I'm waiting for the light to change, and a woman came up to me, and she said to me, "Dear one, can I speak to you for a moment?" And I looked over at this woman, and she said to me, "Do you realize there's a UFO attached to you?" And I looked up thinking, oh no, like they're chasing me now. And then she said, "No, I don't mean right now, but in your lifetime." She said, "Your energy is like a beacon in the night." She said, "You have very strong energy, so you're attracting both positive and negative forces." She said, "You need to learn how to hone in your energy so you're not so open." And I'm like, okay. And then she said, "You should be grateful that you're one of the chosen ones." And I said, and I was angry because I'd chosen. I said, I didn't choose this to be, taken from my bed, to be going through all this trauma, to have experiments on my body, to be used as a host body for whatever purpose. I didn't choose this. And I said, and I don't feel like I'm supposed to be special because of this. I said, this is not something I would ever want, for my enemy. And she was smiling, and she said to me, "Once you know why, you'll start to understand what's really going on." But at the time, I was only 21, 23 when I saw that woman. And, but that was just one of the messengers. Another one came up to me, and she said to me, "I see there was 4 of you." And she said, "You 4 of you had an experience with a UFO." And I went, "Yes." And she said, "The baby almost died." And I don't even know what this baby was. And she said, "The baby almost died, and the oldest one didn't remember anything." She said, "Do you know why?" I said, "No." She said, "The serum that they give you to lose, the memory serum that they give every abductee, they gave too much to the baby and too much to the older ones, and the older one, and not enough to you and your other one that was close to your age. That's why you remember." And who is this woman?
Yeah.
How did you know this?
Yeah, who do you work for? Yeah. How do you know this? Were you there? Were you in on it? Yeah, like that's okay. So we're gonna pause right here, but we will be back after a commercial break. So if you're listening to this audio only version, head over to youtube.com/the Experiencers Support Association so you can see the video that goes with this audio. Remember, you are listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, a podcast by the Experiencers Support Association, and we will be right back.
It's your business. It's your property. Your assets are worth protecting. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services specializes in patrolling and inspecting residential or commercial property against fire, theft, vandalism, terrorism, and illegal activity. People and buildings are monitored to prevent crime. Keep your property, your people, and your assets safe from threat. Our elite staff are dual licensed private investigators and security guards. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services. Go to blacklightiss.com.
The same thing that draws aliens to our planet is the same thing that draws us to others. Exploration, curiosity, sustainability of life. That's why we go. It would make sense as to why they're visiting here.
Travis! Quit playing around, man. Get back here. Travis!
The last thing I remember was this numbing shock. Stunning sort of a feeling. Very powerful.
Get away from me!
I was just out of my mind with fear, just screaming the whole time.
It's been theorized that aliens prefer remote areas because they don't want to attract attention. Whatever it is that they're doing, they would want to do that in a less populated area. there are multiple accounts of the same thing from people from all over the world. People that do not know each other, do not live in the same cultures, and they're all looking up, they're all seeing things in the sky. So it would be naive of us to think that we're
Ryan is one of Canada's leading new UFO investigators. He conducts and oversees UFO investigations on a constant basis and was really taken by his research. He's compiled a tremendous amount of data regarding UFOs in Canada. And just as interesting, he really goes over how UFO investigations are done and what are some of the mistakes that people make when they submit evidence. Note for starters, don't edit your videos or photos before you send them. If you want to hear more follow-up conversation between Ryan and myself, you can go to richardolanmembers.com, where we have a candid conversation on ufology, the paranormal, and more. And remember, while we learn and grow and search for the truth, let's be good to each other.
Welcome to the Observation Deck, a state-of-the-art, one-of-a-kind virtual platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus, just like you would in real life. First, you install the application and design your very own unique avatar. Then you're free to explore the various areas of the campus at any time from anywhere. There's so many areas and activities to choose from on the platform. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, a large expo hall, a movie theater, a nightclub, an art gallery, and even a beach. Come attend a conference or take a class or hear a lecture. Meet new friends and interact directly with presenters. It's all right here on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Where in the world will you go?
Have you ever wondered, or maybe just thought to yourself, if there were others just like you? You know, people with extraordinary abilities, psychogenic advancement, and perhaps unique intuitions. Maybe you just wondered if there were other people who experienced unimaginable, unexplained, or even unusual and paranormal events. Are there people who have more questions, more fears than answers? Well, you're not alone. You've never been alone. We believe you. Sign up for EA today by going to tesacan.org/EA. That's TESACAN.org/EA. Welcome back. You are listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. Did you know that we have a private community chat for members of our YouTube channel? If you become a member, you will get bonus content like exclusive videos, including bloopers, behind the scenes, and members-only Q&A. Also, if you've ever experienced an unexplained event involving the paranormal, UFOs, extraterrestrial, dogman, or any other paracryptid, head over to tesacan.org/reporting system. Let the others who have already reported be that example that proves we are making a difference. And if it wasn't for those reports, we would not be able to do what we do, and for that we thank you. I'm still here with Allison Yellowknee, and I'm going to put you on the spot because I know you're a YouTube member. So how are you enjoying it so far? And thank you so much for being a member.
Oh, I'm enjoying this for sure. It's always good to share, because I feel the more that I share it, it also helps me heal. Putting words to our thoughts are very healing, right? And through, like I said, through Reiki, something I mentioned earlier within the intro, that really helped me through my healing of this lifelong trauma. And you know, it helped me to be able to function within the two worlds, I guess, to put it that way. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm just trying to keep track of the whole timeline. So 21, I think, is where we left off with the psychic lady that knew everything about your life. So there's a few years in between there. Has anything else happened since then?
Oh, well, okay. So if we go back to when I was 8 years old with the needle injection,
Yeah.
After that, I was starting to I felt like my body was being prepped.
Okay.
That was the feeling. So that's why I was having all these markings on my body. Like I said, I think they're holding me down.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any conscious memory of being held down in that sense. But when I'd wake up, I'd be like sore. My body would be like aching everywhere. And I didn't know why. I was always waking up with pain and ailments and struggling to breathe. I would actually have those heart pains every time after an experience, those sharp heart pains. And that lady who also talked about when they gave us, my brother, too much and me not enough, she mentioned that with, what was it? Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
So having those experiences for her to see or to know that we were having that something was given to us to make us remember or to forget. That made a lot of sense, because if that's what they were doing to me every time they abducted me, if they were stopping my heart, starting my heart, and that maybe that, and she said to me what they were injecting into me was adrenaline.
Okay.
And so that's what she told me. And I thought, okay, this is somebody telling me, how does she know all this stuff? So I call them messengers through my life that I've had people come and tell me things. And then another one, this was all by accident too. I'm going to go up to this other messenger. I was going to see this healer, natural healer. I was having like breakouts on my face. I was breaking out a lot. I didn't know why. And so she was doing theta healing. And I thought it was an interesting thing. I've never tried that before. But she was doing this body scan. She was using her fingertips and she was body scanning me. And she was able to figure out what was happening with my face. And she told me that right away. But then she said to me, there's something else really big here. And she kept on doing this to my stomach. And I didn't know what she was doing. And she said to me, you have a lot of missing memory. She said, I don't mean like you're forgetful. I mean, your memory has been taken from you. Do you know what I'm talking about? And I just said, yes, I do. And she said, I see 3 implants in your body. Do you know what I'm talking about? And I said, yes. And she said, 1 in your head. That's that scar. She said, 1 in your heart and 1 in your right ankle. So this right ankle that she was referring to, I have a skin issue. I'm sensitive to metals, and I actually have a skin condition, really bad rash area. Kind of, it's always been there for a long time, and my right ankle. And for her to tell me that's where it is.
And you had that prior to her telling you that?
Oh yeah, many years. And then
okay.
And then she kept on reading more, and she said to me, and she got really emotional. She said to me, your uteral wall is very thin and weak because it's like you've had dozens of babies. And I said, okay. And she said, do you realize that for many years you couldn't have children? I said, I am aware of that. My spouse and I were together for 7 years before we could actually have earth children. And she said to me, they disconnected. She said, the way I'm going to explain to you is like, she said, it's like they disconnected your uterus from your vagina so you could not get pregnant, but you were having multiple babies. And she said, and I said, I totally know what you're talking about. So she was able to pinpointed that. And so it's always good to have that validation. So I was like, I totally know that, because all my life I've had these symptoms of pregnancy, which I didn't know they were pregnancy until I had my first child in 1995.
Okay.
So
these other babies, where do you suppose that those are?
Okay, so I'll go through this part of the story about the hybrids stuff.
Okay.
So in my preteens, I was having a lot of ailments. I was always feeling nauseated. I was still having those heart pains, a lot of those heart pains constantly. The belly button stuff that was happening, and then a lot of pain in that area. And some of the stuff I'll talk about is not not nice, but as a woman goes through monthly time, so I would have periods of 3 months of nothing, no period, and then I'd have these stomach movements, and then I'd wake up to a messy bed. So that happened a lot. I also was lactating, and at the time, even though we had health, I didn't know that wasn't normal. I thought that was normal that girls go through in puberty or whatever. So I thought that was a normal thing girls went through. So I went to the doctor about these movements a few times. And so it feels like there's flip-flopping in there. There's something happening in there. But I was a virgin, so he wasn't going to give me a pregnancy test because I'm 13, 14, 15, whatever. And I remember going to him again at 16. This was the same doctor that I talked about that said, that I told him that there's a needle in my heart, right? So it's the same doctor. And I said, I'm always having these stomach movements. And he said, oh, it's probably just stomach spasms, dismissed everything, I would say. So I would have these symptoms, like I said, the movements, just a lot of different things relating to that. And it wasn't until I was pregnant with my first son that I recognized all those symptoms in the first trimester.
Wow.
And so in 1994, we'd been trying to have children. I was only 22, but I was with him since I was 16. And I'll mention something before I said that. I remember saying to him, how come you don't wake up and all this stuff happens to me? And no, he asked me, how come I don't wake up and all this stuff happens to you? And I said, yeah, why don't you wake up and all this stuff happens to me? So we had a lot of arguments because he didn't believe my stories either. So it was really difficult to deal with somebody for 20 years and they don't believe you or support you. So it was a difficult relationship to be in when you have something like this happening and they don't believe. So it was difficult. But so as I mentioned, we tried to have children. We went to these in vitro clinics. We did all different things. And we decided we'll just let nature take its course and not worry about it anymore. So in 1994, I went and saw an elder. It was my first time. So I didn't grow up with my culture. I didn't grow up really understanding about my native culture. So in my early 20s, I was starting to really want that feeling of like, where do I belong? And while I was traveling through BC, I went to see an elder, and I told her, I said, I have a lot of nightmares that come true. And, but she said to me, your desire is to have a child. And I said, yes. And so she prayed over me, and she gave me these dream catcher earrings and said, wear these at night. And I did. So, and that night, as I was praying and asking, for a child, the next thing I remember is being not in my hotel room anymore. I'm walking through this hazy, misty room. I couldn't tell you if I was in a craft or I was underground. I couldn't tell you that. I just know that the room was dark and misty, kind of grayish, light blue. And there was like moisture in the air. When you go to like a produce section and there's that misty water that they come out from, it's kind of like that feeling in this room. And there was a woman figure walking in front of me, and she was leading me. So I'm actually not scared in this experience. Usually I'm fearful, but I wasn't afraid in this experience. And she was leading me down in this room, and we approached these 2 rows of children, and they're all different ages because they're all different sizes. I would say 16, maybe. I didn't count them as I walked through these 2 rows, but I was walking in the middle of the 2 rows of children. Some had hair, some didn't have hair. Some had big eyes, some had regular human eyes. They all looked different, but I felt a connection to them all. And I remember as I was walking within that row of this row of children, some of them were like grabbing at my hands and were walking alongside me. And I remember just feeling all this love for all these children that were around me, even though they didn't look normal to me, but I still loved them. And as I followed the woman, she turned around and she handed me a baby boy. He was wrapped in a blue blanket, and she said to me, you can keep this one. And then I woke up back in my bed, and I was like, what happened? And then I was having those heart pains for like 2 weeks straight. Just that heart pain. I couldn't catch my breath. I was like so couldn't figure out what's going on. So 2 weeks later, I'm in the hospital in Burns Lake, BC, because I couldn't breathe. I was having that hard heart pain, and I found that I was pregnant.
Wow.
And then we came back to Edmonton and started to figure out things out about the pregnancy and going to a doctor. And they said, okay, well, your due date's going to be February 15th to 20th. We don't, that time in 94, that was the and I said, no, he's going to be born on February 1st. And the doctor would argue with me or I'd argue with him the whole pregnancy. And I'd say February 1st. He goes, nope, February 14th. I've been doing this for 25 years. I can estimate it'll be close to the 14th or 15th. And I said, don't go anywhere on February 1st. Right. So January 31st, I had my weekly visit with the doctor. And he said, nope, you haven't dilated yet. We're looking for a couple more weeks. I said, nope, a couple more days. He'll be here. So that night I had like this drop, what they call the baby drop. The baby dropped that night. The next morning my water broke. So that was January 31st. January 31st, the water broke. And I was in the hospital, 24 hours of labor, and born on February 1st.
That's
and the doctor walked in. He said to me, how did you know? I said, I just knew he was going to be a boy. He was going to be born on February 1st. So
that's interesting. I'm going to call to David Petrella because I know he's in the audience. He's an astrologer. He's part of Tessa. So I don't know if you want to comment, Dave, on any significance on February 1st in terms of zodiacs or astrology. If there's anything you know to mind, because that's really interesting. Okay, so you've been busy in this UFO phenomenon. You are a lot of people there's a need, and so I'm interested to segue a little bit, but probably try to bring it back to this. But have you had any paranormal experience? And that's kind of, if we were to stereotype or segue into ghosts and spirit, have you had any of those type of experiences over the years?
I have. I'm not afraid of ghosts, but if I see a mouse running across the floor, I'm screaming my head off, not even knowing I'm screaming. So, so with my work of Reiki, I actually have done a lot of clearings of spirit. I can communicate with them and find out, ask them questions or help them cross over. So as a child, I don't recall having too many ghost stories. Just within the community of Wabasca, every community seems to have some kind of a fable or story. And so I had a couple of those type of experiences where there was one guy, he was told that he walked with the devil and to stay away from him. We always thought that parents told the kids that just to keep them inside, but found out that this guy was really true. And we did have an experience where ended up walking behind him and there was two voices and they're both laughing at the same time. And we found out oh my God, that's John Mack. His name happened to be John Mack. It's so funny because there's the researcher from who's passed away. But this guy's name was John Mack as well. But he was like the town drunk, as you put it, and was told that he sold his soul to the devil. And so people said that he walked with the devil. So I was 13 years old and my cousin and I came across him and there was two voices, two people laughing at the same time. So that was a really scary experience for us at that time.
Interesting. Do you think it's possible that ghosts and aliens are connected?
Well, I believe the way I think of things is that we're all in different dimensions. And I always think that it's a different dimension that they're in. And even with the alien encounters, I don't believe all of them were coming in a UFO. I don't believe that they're all travel in UFOs. I believe that we have underground bases, just like when Phil Schneider talked about his experience going down underground. a lot of that resonated with me because he talked about, the underground aliens, and he talked about the suits and how they shot lasers at him, and that's how his hand got melted off. And he talked about how that laser came out of the belt of the alien gray. And that's exactly what was coming at me when I was trying to run away from a gray. That was in 97. And he was wearing a silver suit and he had his belt. And that's where the laser was being shot at, was on his belt. So that was in 97.
Interesting.
And yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Well, I'm intent. I'm listening here. So, like you've obviously, your research shows. So you've done a lot of diving into this to try to find rational explanations as to what has happened, why it has happened. And you're still looking. You haven't really concluded on anything yet, have you?
Well, so I do have a lot of conscious memory, but I have a lot of missing memory as well. I have talked about getting into regression. Actually, I did reach out to your team as well to try to connect with somebody in person. And that's where the challenge is. Like we talked about, Canada doesn't really have all these resources available to us. So Yvonne Smith has been somebody I've been reached out to before in the past. So Peter Robbins is another one. My good friend is Daryl Sims, who's the alien hunter. And then Chris Rutowski, who's in
Manitoba.
Yeah, Manitoba. So those were all going to be on my roster for that conference I was going to host, as well as Travis Walton. I met Travis Walton through that Pal Talk that I was talking about there. So he's the one who led me to John Mack. And at that time, Mr. John Mack was still working at Boston University, and I was invited to go and meet him and work with him, but I'd have to dedicate 6 weeks to the research to be there, because they did like sleep. They did a lot of different things, from regression to counseling to monitoring my sleep, body scans. It was going to be a big full out thing. And unfortunately, though, he was killed while he was at a conference. So didn't get to happen. So yeah, over the years, I've done a lot of research, especially when it came to the experiencers' common, I guess, ailments, or, those feelings. Like a lot of experience that I've met, none of them have really gone sideways, where they need mental health or they're institutionalized and needing, medication. A lot of people that I've come across, we all live regular lives, and we're able to function in this world, but we just have these experiences that, what connects us. So I think somewhere along the lines, they put this balance in our life. I don't know how that goes about, because I still, like I said, I want to learn more about my own experiences. I do want some conscious memory. I have had, more conscious memory of it. I've had a couple elders tell me, don't do it. He says, enough already. He says, delving more into it, it may affect your life. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah, well, once you unlock it, once you learn, you won't be able to put it back in too, right? There's, I know with regression, when it does work, it unlocks it, and then you can't. I don't know if you can dial down, like remembering a little bit, or you remember all of it. Mm-hmm. And if there's a lot that's been regressed or suppressed, you are taking that risk. So, but that's where you have to make that conscious decision for yourself as to when you're ready, and whether or not you have enough. And maybe that was subliminally suggesting that there are some negative things and elements that you don't remember, and there might be some judgment there, or they're concerned that if you were to realize those things, that it might affect you. I don't recommend regression for those reasons alone, because we never know, where the mind's going to go. And I don't want to be responsible for you being completely normal, then all of a sudden terrified for the rest of your life. But at the same time, it could answer a lot of questions. It could be uplifting, it could be comforting. So, and I understand and I appreciate the need to meet some people in person. And it's hard. It's been very hard with the last 2 years with the pandemic and everything else too. But even prior to that, we didn't really have any groups or people would do these things on their own and try to connect and talk to each other. But there hasn't been really any regulations or collections of keeping people connected and network and things like that. So we started, have you heard of our Experiencers Anonymous group?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is kind of on the philosophy, right? It's been virtual, but eventually we like to start to do little camps in other areas too. MUFON called them chapters, but where we would create that opportunity for other people to just come and meet, and then eventually you would network with others in your area. So with regression, if you know someone and you trust them, say your concerns, use that, and do that. Now, I'll put my investigator hat on. If there's a case that you've submitted or haven't submitted, I would like to get as much of the data from you as at this state until you're ready, so that way it's documented in report form. You have a copy of it, and then we can kind of weed out some of these things and then focus in on regression. So the way I work with regression is then I would give specific questions to be answered, so that way we can kind of validate that the regression is third party, so it doesn't know me, doesn't know you, or depending on the simple things, so we can compare the timestamp data that was already recorded. So this testimony as is essentially a piece of evidence because you're saying it here, and then we were to find other things that kind of correlate to that later on, then we can show that regression works, because there are some people that provide that service, but they're just doing that and misleading and guiding to certain thoughts and playing on the mind, which is very damaging as well. So it's very hard to use that tool effectively. However, I can make referrals too. I do know some people that I do trust for regression, but we do need more in other areas, because you probably would benefit more from having it in person. You can do it virtually, because it's just like listening to tones on YouTube or something like that to help you sleep and things like that. But there's a lot of information that can come out of it. I'm terrified of doing regression for myself. I've had an experience that I'm trying to figure out, but I mean, I'm afraid that once I unlock all that, and then there's things like that. So I have those fears. Mm-hmm. So have you done any, besides talking? I'm not trying to discourage you from doing regression. If you need to do regression, do it at your own pace. I'm just saying in terms of research, right? Document everything, then do it and compare what new information comes. Get it recorded, have an audio sample, and then that way you can at least prove to yourself that you're telling the truth. Forget what other people are going to say. They're going to say what they're going to say no matter what, but at least you can show that you've learned more and build off of that. But do you do anything else to cope with this other than sharing your story here on podcasts and then meeting other people and doing things to you? How are you like as a person living with this today?
So over the years, I've, like I said, I tried to find the balance in life, right? So a lot of people I work with, or even some friends, don't even know about what I've been through. I'll also say this is kind of a funny thing, but I've been single for very long, and it's because I won't be with anybody else who is going to be a non-believer. Like, it's so hard to find somebody who is going to actually, put the time in to understand me and understand what I've been through. At the same time, we talked about like anything else. So my intuition has really built very strongly through Reiki. I believe that really helped me. So that really helped me with a lot of things. So I always heard people say to me, like 3 or 4 people have said to me in my life, once you let go of the fear, you'll start to really understand what's going on or what happened or why. And through Reiki, it was almost like I had lived in this fear bubble all my life, and it was just holding on to it. And as soon as I had my first session of Reiki with this woman, she told me I was led there. I totally know I was led there. I was looking for hands-on healing, and that kept popping up. This word Reiki kept popping up. And then one day I applied to a job where I was going to be a personal assistant to 4 practitioners, and one was a Reiki master. And so I took the job, and she gave me Reiki that first session, and it was almost like everything, that bubble had bursted, and I didn't have anything to hold on to anymore. That fear that I was holding on to was now gone. So I never, after that point, and after 2001, when my experience was stopped, I really felt that was the first time in my life that I actually had control over my body and my life. Because all my life I felt like I was external, like this was just a body, like they keep taking my body, they keep doing this to me. I have no control over this. And after the 2001 stuff that happened, it was the first time that I had control. They don't take me anymore. I know they do watch over me, because it seems like every time I would talk about them, there'd be a UFO sighting in the area. So it's like, don't talk about it anymore. So I scared some friends actually that came to see me in Wabasca. And this was in 2010. And they came because I lived up there for a while, 2007 to 12. That was a part of me getting over my fear as well, because my fear started there. So for me to face my fear, I went and I worked there, I lived there, and I lived alone with little kids, and I lived in no fear at all. And I think it's because of the strength that I built up with through Reiki and knowing more about universal and energy really helped me. As I mentioned before, as a kid, I used to do a lot of astral traveling. And I didn't understand why. Like I could leave my body and go travel down to my friend's house and go see what they're doing in their backyard, and then go back. But there was one experience. There's one experience that I had where I was traveling through what I thought was it was a wormhole. Maybe I explained it as a child as going through a kaleidoscope of colors, because I felt like I was going so fast through this tunnel. And I could see the tunnel walls beside me. I couldn't see anything above or below me. I was in this tunnel zooming, going so fast. And then at one point, I was now in space, and I didn't have a body. I was like one with the universe. I was the universe. I was everything and nothing at the same time. And I remember feeling that freedom, and I still want to get there, because then I get there through Reiki as well. But that feeling of being the universe. And then all of a sudden back in that tunnel again. And then all of a sudden I'm going back again. And now I'm like as tiny as a speck of sand, like one little speck of sand. I felt like I was that tiny. And then I was back in the wormhole again. Then I was back in my bed. So I don't know what that message was, if that was just showing me, how powerful we are in this universe of, I am one with the universe. We all are one with the universe.
Yeah. And
being everything and nothing.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. The kaleidoscope thing is familiar to me. I had an experience with flow tanks. So it took me, I think, the full 2 hours before I unleashed all the stress and the thoughts and all that other stuff. And it was empty-minded for maybe 10 minutes. And then I started to see this, I would describe that as a kaleidoscope kind of effect, but I didn't know what word to put to it. So hearing you say that kind of resonates with that. And I think that was kind of the start of me, perhaps, doing that. I'm trying to explore all those elements too, as an investigator too, but to understand how to get to these places and where they all connect to, because you experiencers, this is an experience. There's got to be something, or I believe that there is something that is connected to you and other experiencers that you guys share. There's something, not just the experience, but maybe something genetically, maybe ancestry, biologically, there's like you mentioned several people being another girl, back in, beside you during some of these events. Maybe that girl is listening. Maybe we need to find other people and that have shared these experiences. So I just want to comment on how brave you are for sharing this story, despite all the things that have happened and all these people that have not believed you in the past and may not continue to believe you, but you're still so certain that this has happened to you. You're confident in it, and you're sharing it. And I hope that others who are listening to this can reach out and share notes, because if you guys work together and talk about it, maybe you can get more, as I said before, get more information and be like, it was a tunnel, and remember this, and then you guys kind of figure that out. It's like watching a movie and then you forget about it, but you've seen the movie, and then somebody brings it up and then you start remembering and things like that too. And I don't know how we can do that other than, I hope that once this circulates and everyone sees it, other people will come in and say, hey, me too. And that's how we know we're not alone. And do you think, and we kind of didn't even touch this at all, but do you think the government is involved in this, or is this completely separate? They don't have control of it. None of our business. Leave them out of it. What are your thoughts on that?
So I was just writing down something just as you were talking about it as well.
Yeah.
So my experiences have been with many different species of,
okay.
And I'll kind of get into that. So the first experiences that I remember was the ones that were wearing robes, but the rest of them were like grays. So the one experience when I talked about the gray shooting lasers at me, he was chasing me, and I was an adult, and I was running under a picnic table. I don't know why I felt I was going to be safe under a picnic table, but as I was under the picnic table, he grabbed me in a way that I couldn't get away. I couldn't get up from the table, and as he reached his fingers wrapped around my whole arm. And I did have a bruise on that hand afterwards, but and then those finger marks again. But that's why I was able to realize now why all my life I had these finger marks, which I thought were fingertip marks, was because when he grabbed my arm under that picnic table, he was now face to face with me. So that alien gray's face was right in front of me. They have no feelings. I feel like those are like robotic. They have no feelings. He came right at me. His face was right there, and his eyes looked like they were big, black, protruding. They looked like they were black, but I was so close that I could actually see the grid lines as if it was, holographic. And I realized it was, because when I went to go push his hand away, you know what silly putty feels like? This is exactly what his face felt like. That was the only way I could describe it. But I pushed his head away from me, because he was like this close to me. And I pushed his head back. And when I did that, my fingers went through the eye sockets. So his eye sockets were not protruding big black eyes. They were actually hollow. And my fingers actually grabbed inside as if it was.
That would hurt.
So it was a mask. It wasn't a face. And then I woke up again, but I had that feeling on my hand as if I still had oil on my hand. It was kind of an oily feeling. And I wish I would have known about the black light stuff back then, because that's one thing that Daryl Sims has done a lot of research in, is experiencers who had a recent experience that he'll put a black light on and you'll actually see the difference.
Yeah, say there's some fluorescent that might still be visible, residual evidence afterwards. Yeah.
Right.
But you got to catch that right away.
I know. So that was something I didn't know about, but I had that residual feeling in my hand for hours after that event, because I was awake, and then I woke up again, and I woke up again. So it was one of those wake dreams again. That's why I describe it as wake dreams. So that was the grays. And then I kept everything by year. So in 1991, I was living in an apartment, and my ex worked out of town. So it was the first time I was going to be living home alone for a while, or be home alone. And I just went to bed. I was still awake. I was still awake, laying in bed. I was just reading, put the book down, laid down on the bed with my hands crossed like this over my stomach. And I took a couple deep breaths, and then I heard some noise, and because I lived alone. And I looked at the bedroom entrance door, the door at the bedroom, and there's a little woman that was crouched down. So I would call these people ancients, because to me they looked indigenous, like native, but She was really petite, like maybe 4 foot tall. She had her body looked like she was very old, ancient. Like it was like cripply, like I couldn't explain it. But her hair was long black, and she had this white streak of hair, and it was tucked behind her ear like this. And she said to me, she was talking to me about my ex. She said to me, if he doesn't quit this job, he's going to die. And I thought that was weird. And then she ripped up some papers, started a fire on my floor. And I'm like, I couldn't move. I'm in my bed. I could not move. And then these 2 people appeared. And I see people because they look like humans. And one of them, they're on each side of my bed. And I'm now starting to float above my bed. And they actually grabbed my arms and they led me to my feet. And that woman was no longer there. But those 2 beings, those 2 guys, led me out of my bedroom. I wasn't touching the floor at all. But they're holding my arms down. When we got to the living room, the whole room shifted as if I couldn't explain it. The room shifted, and all of a sudden I was in a round room. At the time, I did not even clue in that I was in a UFO. I just thought I was in this round room with windows all around. Well, how did we get here? What happened to my apartment? And I'm asking questions like, where are we? And they just pointed to the window, and we were just at the window. Like it was just like we flew right to the window, and they pointed down and they were showing me that we were above a street, like an intersection of the city on the south side of Edmonton. And I thought, why am I here? And I said, how did this building get above the intersection? Like I still wasn't cluing in that I was in a craft. And then I woke up back in that same position on my bed, and I was like, what just happened? Like, what's going on? I called my mom. I tried calling my mom, but she didn't answer. I was hysterical. I didn't know what just happened. And then I was like really groggy, and I was shaking, and I went to the bathroom to go put water on my face, and all of a sudden I started to float backwards, like up. So I'm like floating backwards. Like, what's going on? Like, and then I woke up again. Yeah. And I woke up again in my bed for that 3rd time. Now, like, I'm pinching myself. I had a touch lamp. I'm trying to reach for the touch lamp.
Kept going back and forth. Yeah.
And weird. So I started praying. I said, dear God, please help me. And then just then that whole let go, like I felt that was like this fighting paralysis, and then the whole let go. So that was experience that I had with human type of experiences. Then it talks about government. Okay, so 2001, jumping back to 2001, working on the project, I got hacked. I mentioned that. So at that same moment that I was getting the MSN Messenger, of course we had dial-up back then. We had to call in, right? So I had dial-up. And so just as the file transfer was happening, my screen went red, black, red, black. My phone rang. It said 0123456789 on the it was like the phone. And then my computer shut down. And when I tried to turn it back, I had those big floppy disks we had back then. So I had that inside the computer, and my project was saved on that floppy disk on the computer, and I had emailed it to a couple of those directors already, from Space Channel, it was called Space Channel back then, and APTN. So they all had a piece of like my storyline. And one of my friends, I had him read it as well. So I had emailed this project to other people. Well, during that hacking, when I finally opened up the computer, my cousin was living with me, and he was computer tech. And he said, this is beyond anything I know. He said, this is like high-tech hacking, because everything was wiped out of my computer. The operating system was totally wiped out. That disk that was in the computer, totally wiped out. We did not have technology to wipe out that disk from hacking. And also the project that I emailed out to people was no longer in their inboxes. Like it was gone. So, and then that's the same night that, and this is where it gets strange. And I never really believed in Men in Black. Okay. So what happened is that night I'm trying to get my computer back and running again. I called the operator to see, can you trace this number? There was no such thing as 0123456789. And so I was like really upset because 6 months of my work is gone down the drain. Nobody has a copy of it. and I've got these companies that are asking me for the final draft, like, and I'm like, I don't have one now. So I'm trying to get my computer back and running again. My cousin's working on everything, getting the operating system back on. It was just this big thing. And so that night, it was February 14th, 2001. And so I was sitting at the kitchen looking out the window, and I was looking above the garage, and there was this huge flash. And then all of a sudden I was like, went to bed. I kind of was an insomniac, but all of a sudden now I'm going to bed. And I remember like consciously going from the kitchen, big flash, going to bed. And then I had dreams of panthers. I don't know if you've come across anybody yet who's talked about panthers, but there was 10 panthers in my backyard. 2 of them were on their hind legs, and then they went on all fours when they come into the yard. So to me, they had just shifted into being a panther. I don't know. So these panthers were angry in the backyard. 3 of them jumped on a tree that's by my son's bedroom window. Like that tree rubs along the window so much it'll rub up against the glass. But all of a sudden, after I saw those 3 panthers, I woke up to my son screaming. And he said, Mommy, 2 big black cats came through the window, and they're heavy on my legs. And they told me that they're going to take me if you don't stop what you're doing. Right. And I'm like, what? And so I had seen those 3 panthers jump on that tree. And so he was able to see it too.
So interesting about that too is because like you were unable to conceive, and then you were able to conceive, and then you had him.
I have 3 sons, actually. Yeah.
You have 3 now. So can all of them see things as well? Do they have experiences?
They don't, but at this time they did. So, okay. And he was 3 years old. The older one, Shane, the one I told you was born on February 1st. He's always been superhuman, I guess I could say. He was reading and writing by the time he was 2.5. Since he was 8 years old, he knew, he was 2.5, and we'd be walking down a parking lot, and he could name off every vehicle in the parking lot at 2 years old. And I read him books every day, but I never read him car manuals. So he'd say, there's a Dodge, there's a Jeep, that's a Jeep TJ. And then he'd say, look at that, Mom, it's a 1965 Bel Air ragtop 350 engine. I'm like, what? And he was 2.5. So he had this extreme knowledge in mechanics, and he's a mechanic now. Aaron, who was the one who had the panther experience with me, he's 24 now. I did have an infant child during that time, and he's now 21. So it was Aaron who had this the experience of the panthers. When I was pregnant with him, an elder told me that he was my protector. She said he's your protector. And so he was 3, but all my kids did speak very well. I talked to them like humans, not babies. So they spoke in good sentences at the time. So when he had that shared, he was telling me about the panthers in his room. He said, Mommy, they were heavy on my legs. They were walking on the bed, and they're going to take me if you don't stop what you're doing. And so the next day, I kept him in my bed that night. And I couldn't believe it either. Like I thought anytime I was going crazy, this was the time. Okay. So the next morning I woke up and there was a black sedan parked outside my house. I had a corner house and a big bay window, and there's this black car sitting up front, and there's 2 men sitting in there, and they had hats on, they had glasses on, black suits on. And I just closed my curtains. I'm like, who the heck is that? I thought maybe they're Jehovah's Witness because they frequented the area. Didn't put too much thought into it that first day, but they were there all day. So meanwhile, my cousin's there. He's getting everything together. I'm back to the project again. I kind of had a memory where I was at. So I started all over again, doing my work. For 5 days in a row, that car parked outside my house. Of course, we didn't have cameras like this, right? I had a camera that I had film, and I started taking pictures of this car parked outside. the second day, my mom said, that car has been out there for 2 days now, and they keep looking in the window. I'm getting freaked out about that. And I said, yeah, so am I. And I looked out the window and I stood out there like this, like, I see you, right? I had my hands crossed, and I stood up and they just stared at me the whole time. So as soon as my ex would get home, they would leave. So it was so strange because I'd ask people to drive by. Can you please drive by and get the plate number? You know, I tried everything because I knew I didn't really want to go out there yet. But the third day, I was angry. No, I'm going to go out there. I put my shoes on. I go open the door. I walked on the sidewalk, and they sped off. So before that, though, I called the police and said, look, there's this car been parked outside my house for 3 days. They're standing outside. They're watching me. I need to, can you please do a drive-by, get their plate number? And they said, well, it's a public street. We can't, you can't do anything about that. And they said, well, if they get out of the car and actually come on and peek in your window, then we can do something about it. I said, well, that's ridiculous. So day 4, I'm going back into doing everything again, still working on it. Car's still parked out there. And they look like the Men in Black, totally look like the Men in Black. So the 5th day, I went to the store to get that film developed. And when I came back, or while I was at the store, I'm looking through all the photos. Every photo was there clear except for those photos of the Men in Black car. They were all blacked out. All the photos of them were blacked out completely. I could not believe it. I was like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
So as I'm walking home, I see the car parked outside the house. I'm going to come up behind it because I took a bus. And so now I'm going to go walk up behind it and get them. I saw them look in their side mirrors. And then as I'm approaching the house, they're driving away and I'm chasing the car. Like, I know who you are. Stay away from me and my family. And so now this is day 5. I've managed to get a lot together. I worked 18-hour days and getting all this done together. My ex was angry with me, like, you're too obsessed with this now. Like, what about the kids? And he was getting really angry with me. So that 5th day, we had the other experience, and it was the Panthers again. And
so the car had left, and then the Panthers came.
Yeah. And then that's when I said, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to let this happen again. And I swore and I prayed and I said, you do not have permission to take me and my family again. It ends with me. I will sacrifice my life for my family. It ends with me. Whatever contract you think we have, we no longer is there. And I kept on demanding this, and I was yelling at the ceiling. My ex thought I was crazy. And
well, it worked.
Well, what happened was that next morning, I was so sick. I had never been so sick in my life. I thought I was dying. I thought, like I told them, I sacrificed my life for my family. So I think they're killing me now. I think I'm dying. I couldn't even tell you which way was up. I was like up. I was walking on the wall, ceiling. I couldn't even, my eyes were going spinning around. And I told my ex, let the kids know I love them. I'll watch over them from the other side. He's like, I'll take you to the mental hospital. And, so that night I prayed, and I just prayed again. And I just prayed, to Creator, please watch over my children. And I said, I promise I'll stop. And then the next morning, Aaron, the youngest one, the middle one, came running to me. He said, Mommy, a man came to my room last night. And I just, oh no. He said, no, Mommy, this was a good man. And he said to me, he told me he's here to protect us, and nothing bad's going to happen to us again. You're not going to be taken ever again. And he's here to protect us. And that is when everything stopped.
Well, and then that's good. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we only have about 5 minutes left, and I normally do a segment. You've seen the show. I think we can skip. Unless we can skip that segment, but I'm curious to know. Now that you've come so far, and I'm proud to hear this. This is a story. Like you've endured, you've fought, you've changed, and then you stopped, and then now you're here, you're doing it again, and you're researching still, you're still learning, you're engaging others, you're bringing other people together. So, what's next? Like, where are you going from here?
Well, what I'm doing is I'm gathering the stories of my relatives as well. I do have a cousin who lives not too far from me, and she has been having ongoing experiences as well as her children, and they are seeing the Panthers as well. As I talked about the family bloodline, so my grandmother had experiences, numerous aunts and uncles, and then their kids. So I know and I hope that it has stopped for my family, because my sons have never talked about having experiences. One elder, I told him, so I'm glad I didn't have daughters, because I was worried that they would go through what I went through. And then he said to me, well, your sons will have daughters. And that like put this fear into me, right? It's like, oh my God. But, I do put a lot of faith that that negative stuff that had happened is over and done with. And at least I broke the contract for my immediate family, but it's still happening. So when mine stopped, my cousins started. So it's almost like they switched out.
Okay. Maybe you made them afraid of you. You were so confident that they're like, okay, look, we're not going to win this one over. We're going to have to up the game. Who knows? But,
yeah.
I mean, from a private investigator perspective, I mean, they work obviously conducting surveillance. They could have been watching other places there. They could have been watching other people. But when you were approaching them and they saw you in the mirror and then they responded by leaving, that was kind of an indicator in my eyes that you might have been the subject at that time. So it's still strange. Very strange. And I hope it doesn't happen again. And I don't know. I don't know. So we got, how about, you told me that you were working on a book. Is any of this going to be part of a book, or is that something else?
Yeah, I will be writing about the book I want to start it with my conscious memory of what I have now. I also were talking about regression. I do want to make sure it's somebody I can trust, and then document that. And then if a second book comes out of that, then so be it.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. I think Dave had a question for you. He did. Okay. He said, do you have any memories of past lives in Central or South America?
Okay, I don't, but I've had people come up, as I talked about messengers. I did have a couple people tell me a couple past lives. One told me that I've always been an Indigenous person in my past lives. And one of them, I was connected to the Hopi tribe, that I was the Hopi chief back then. And I was the one who shook hands with the Europeans when they came in, and then they backstabbed us and killed us all off. And then I had one where I remember being a child and asking my mom, how come I'm a girl now? I used to pee standing up. I was about 3 or 4 when I asked her that, because it was like a memory I had at that time.
That's interesting. And Dave, I'm not quite sure the context of that question, but what came to mind too with South did you see South America or South Africa? Where are we? Where's the thing here? South America is like, well, Mexico, like just said, and the Aztecs. So I know that the Aztecs worshipped panther gods. So there's evidence, so perhaps there's some connection to that, but we'll have to put a button on that. So I'm going to say thank you so much for joining us. We're going to do our after chats. We will talk to the people in the chat and have some comments and talk about the show and talk about what's next for Tessa. Allison, if you want to participate in the comments, you certainly can. But thank you so much, and I'm glad we're connected. If there's anything we can do to help you with your research and to help us with ours, because we can help definitely share your stories with other people too and work together on that. I'm definitely interested in getting those documents